Hey, what's up guys, my name is Crash, and today I'm posting the Fable Trilogy. I know some of you might say, haven't you uploaded these separately? Yes, I have, but I wanted to make it easier to access by putting them all into one place, showing not only the evolution of the games, but the evolution of my commentary. But if you enjoyed the content, make sure to leave a like and a sub, but let's get into this. In this review slash retrospective, we're going to go into the story, the gameplay, and many other aspects of Fable. But the first thing I want to start with is the history of the company and who actually worked on the game. Lionhead Studios was the creator of Fable. The original game that they made before this was Black and White, which was like an RTS style game. I used to watch videos on it. It's a really bizarre game, and it's worth a check out if you're even interested in it. You play with gods and stuff like that. But Fable was like their second project that they ended up working on, and it's probably one of their best that they ever got to make before they were sadly shut down years later. Fable was a very innovative and exciting RPG for its time. Even Peter Molyneux said it was like a game that would revolutionize the RPG market, which it did at the time. One of the most innovative aspects of Fable that really set it apart from every other RPG for the time was definitely its morality system. It was really interesting being able to decide if you wanted to be the good holy person where you go and help people or do donations, whatever it may be. Or you could go around wreaking havoc in villages, killing anyone that you want, and end up getting like the evil ending, which is really fun, and I'm really happy that this game was able to innovate in this way for its time, and it really plays a huge role in a lot of other RPGs nowadays. One of the more interesting things about Fable when it first came out is it was supposed to be kind of lifelike, where you could be able to plant an acorn and it would actually grow throughout time, like playing through the game, which really sounded interesting. This is what Peter Molyneux said, and it ended up becoming a gag because it wasn't possible at the time, but it's really interesting how many different details and stuff were supposed to be thrown into this game and get tested out. Sadly, a lot of them didn't end up coming to fruition, but at least the game still came out great. But let's actually get into the game now.
Deep in the forest of Albion lay the small town of Oakvale, unchanged by time and untouched by the sword. Here lived a boy and his family, a boy dreaming of greatness, of one day being a hero. Sometimes he imagined himself as a noble knight or a powerful wizard. And other times he dreamt he'd be an evil warrior. But in all his dreams of greatness, he could not possibly imagine the power of the destiny that lay before him.
Fable 1 starts you as a child, and you live in Oakvale Village. The way that this works is it pretty much teaches you the ropes as a kid. So you start out talking to your father, and he gives you a quest to go help and get your sister a birthday present because you forgot to get her a present for her birthday. So pretty much what you're either doing is going around doing good deeds, and your father will give you a coin each time you do a good deed, or you can run around and do the most terrible things. I decided to do an evil side of the campaign this time around because usually I do the good side, and it's honestly really entertaining being able to choose which one you want to be. Like in this one, I helped this partner cheat on their other partner, and I also beat up a little kid for his teddy bear, and I broke stock because this one kid told me that I wouldn't do it. So it's honestly interesting how drastically different outcomes you can get because you decided to go with one thing over the other. After you end up doing 3 quests, you end up getting enough money to go buy your sister some chocolate for her birthday. Once you purchase it, you end up finding her out in the fields, and you give her the chocolate. After you give it to her, you actually find out that she has had dreams of this happening before, and there was also another part of the dream. Once you end up walking out of the field, you end up finding out what the other part of the dream was, and that was the village getting attacked. Once the village gets attacked, a lot of people end up dying, even your father ends up dying, sadly. But right when you're about to die to another bandit that is going through the village, you end up getting saved by the guy named Maze. Maze ends up saving you, and he ends up bringing you to the Heroes Guild, where pretty much your story begins. Once you get to the Heroes Guild, this is where kind of your combat tutorial starts to begin. So pretty much what happens is once you get there, you meet a character named Whisper, and you're both going through like the trials of trying to become a hero. So throughout this, they end up teaching you how to do spells, how to use your different types of melee weapons, and even how to be an archer. It's honestly pretty good, and it's a decent way of giving an introduction to it without being too aggressive right off the bat, because the game does have decent challenge later on, so it's a good introduction for people that are new to the genre, at least in my opinion. Once you actually start playing throughout it, it's honestly great. There's a lot of different quests that are right off the bat, and throughout doing the quests and stuff at the beginning, you end up aging until you hit 18 years old. But let's talk about some of the quests before we get into that. The quests that are in the game, at least at the beginning, are somewhat generic, but they end up picking up pace over time. Like some person asks you for apples, you go and grab them apples and bring them back. Something simple like that. It's a fetch quest. Or you have to race this guy and see if you're a faster hero. And like other things like can you beat Whisper in combat and get an A+, we'll give you a different weapon, stuff like that. It's honestly really cool. And they also have some evil stuff like shooting birds. If you want to end up getting that done, you also get a good amount of currency for doing so. And it pretty much shows you like the morality, like helping the girl with apples gives you some goodwill, but you know, shooting the birds ends up giving you evil, which is awesome because it pretty much tells you that certain quests are for good side and certain quests are for the bad side. So depending on, you might not want to do one thing over the other, but one might be a lot more enticing just because of the value that you get from it, which is an interesting way of doing it, at least in my opinion. But once you come to the right age, you end up fighting Maze for your last quest for like the Hero Guild to see if you're actually ready to, you know, venture off. And after you beat Maze, you end up going and saving people at this picnic first. That is your first ever quest in the game, where you have to go kill a mighty bee or whatever you want to call it. It's honestly interesting. It's a really fun fight, and it honestly shows you the first little challenge that you're going to be getting throughout the game. After you end up killing the wasp, you end up getting this renown system. This renown system ends up playing a huge role. Like it ends up giving it like you different types of quests because you have enough renown around the area, and also unlocks different areas to go into, which is a really interesting idea, and I really like the way it's set up. So it's pretty much just saying you are worthy enough to go and do this type of quest, which is really cool, and I'm happy that they have this aspect in the game. So like if you're doing like these basic quests, like they actually have some type of purpose, which I really like. But once you end up getting some of that, there's another thing that you collect throughout the game, which is experience. Experience is pretty much just what every other game has, which is a leveling system, but they do it in a different way, at least it seems. So pretty much with this one, depending on which weapon you're using is what type of experience you get, so that's what you'll be able to level, which I really like. They have a little bit of the middle ground, this green experience, which can go towards anything, even if you haven't been using that certain type of weapon, which I really like. But let's talk about the skill tree. The physical skill tree is kind of basic, so was the archery, but the will is honestly amazing. They went into detail for the spells really well in this game. Like compared to the second and third game, this is the most innovative they've been with like spells, which is kind of sad because it is the first game, but literally there are so many different varieties of spells. Some are a bit useless, but then the other ones are completely unique and you've never seen in a different game, which I really enjoy. The next quest that you end up doing is with Whisper, and pretty much you guys are going to be fighting Hobbs together, and whoever wins ends up getting the trophy. One of the interesting things that they decided to add is the boasting system. So pretty much if you feel like you can do a bit more of a challenge, you can boast and wager 100 to who knows how much money, depending on, and pretty much to get a bigger reward if you are able to do so. So let's say like they tell you to not wear any armor. If you're able to do that, you are given more money than what you were expecting to get. Same thing, like if you feel like you can get more kills than Whisper, they will give you more money for that, or if you feel like you can do it within a certain time limit, stuff like that. It's really interesting, and I wish that they would have brought this back in like the later games, but this feature is completely gone in like the later games, which really sucks because it's an interesting idea, and it's honestly adds a little bit more replayability to the game. If you want a little bit more of a challenge the next time you play through, at least you get to decide on that, which is really fun. But after you're done whooping the shit out of a whole bunch of hobs with Whisper, you can kind of decide if you want to continue the main quest or split off and go do a whole bunch of branching quests. There is honestly a lot of unique side missions, and I would highly recommend, if it's your first time playing through, to go check out a lot of them, because they are honestly the most unique thing that I've ever seen. Like, most games do not light a candle near to what this game has for like variety when it comes to side quests. Like, you'll have one side quest where you have to go find buried treasure for this wife that lost her husband, or trying to dress up to impress a woman that isn't even real, which is really fun. And it's really unique on most of these like side quests, and honestly they're highly enjoyable. They give you good rewards and stuff too, so they're worth checking out. But let's get back onto the main quest. The main quest ends up bringing you to merchants that have to get to Oakvale, and Oakvale is where you're originally from, so your character ends up having a little bit of PTSD after you're able to traverse it like through the forest with these people. But once you get to Oakvale, you end up meeting up with Maze again, and he tells you that your sister is alive. So there's at least some good news here. So what you're pretty much supposed to do is go and fight Twinblade, which is the person that captured your sister. Sadly, with these types of enemies, or even just characters in general, there's a lot of characters that you meet that honestly don't play all too big of a role throughout the story, which really sucks because there's so many of them. And it's hard to keep up with like names just because they only have like 10, maybe 15 words said throughout the whole game, which really sucks, but it's honestly makes sense because most of these characters aren't all too important to the plot. So Twinblade, you'll meet him for maybe like 5 minutes and then you'll completely forget about him for the rest of the game. But at least this is like where you can kind of see the level cap here. So pretty much when you're going to fight Twinblade, this is either going to be a very challenging fight for you, or it could be an easy breeze depending on how you actually been playing the game. Like if you went and did some side quests, or are you just rushing through the story? If you're doing both, this is a very challenging mission. Like personally, I did the one where you couldn't attack anyone, so I had to somehow sneak into the base without getting caught. I did a weird cheese where you run around a tree and they lose aggro on you, and I ran through the gate. And then pretty much what you have to do then is just keep collecting items. So I collected this outfit to go through the next gate, and then you have to do a gamble game or something else to gain access key to get to him. And then once you do that, you have to get like bounty hunters to get or assassins to get them away from the door, and then pretty much wreak havoc. And after you do all this, it's honestly kind of tedious and very long of a like stretch. It's at least interesting. At least there's like different decisions that you get to make throughout it, so it's not like you're just walking around doing nothing. Like you get to decide how you want to get these gates and stuff open for your character, which is somewhat fun. But after you get all of them open, you end up fighting Twinblade, and you actually find your sister is right behind him, pretty much his right-hand man, I guess you could say. She is now blind because her eyes were taken out, but she can actually see the visions, and he's been using her to pretty much see what is going to be happening in the future. But you end up fighting him and defeating him. And this is where one of the morality things come in. Do you want to kill Twinblade, or do you want to keep him alive? It's really up to you what you decide. Personally, I ended up killing him. I feel like this shouldn't be an evil consequence, but it is in the game sense because they want it to be. But if you end up sparing him, he, gives you good points, and that's pretty much all you get from this. You can run around his camp. There's a couple chests there too, so there's some decent loot around him. But if you kill him or if you keep him alive, there's honestly barely any type of difference, which is kind of disappointing because you would expect these to have like major outcomes, but you'll notice with Fable 1, at least it doesn't seem like the outcomes are all too drastic until you play the DLC. So after you're done beating the hell out of the Twinblade and the rest of his army, you end up heading back to the Heroes Guild, and then you get a new quest from Maze. Maze asks you to go to Witchwood to find an archaeologist that is pretty much lost. And this is where one of the most interesting aspects and probably one of my favorite things that they add in each and every game comes into play. There's something called a demon door, and demon doors are honestly really unique to each and every Fable game. Pretty much a demon door is a door that you end up talking to, and it has a challenge for you to do to actually get inside. And all these challenges vary depending on what they actually want. Like the door that you need to open to find the archaeologist wants you to spell his name with these stones that you find, which I'm an absolute professional at doing so.
Try to get your combat multiplier even higher.
H D S I H D S H I D S H I D.
So after you're done messing with the pillars and get the door finally open, you end up heading in and find out the archaeologist actually did not want to be found, and he's very upset with you for actually finding him. He pretty much blames it on you, and he says he has to leave now, and pretty much it kind of ends with a question of why did Maze send us to go find him then? And pretty much what you do after this is you have to go to this one village and pretty much save it from Balverines. The Balverines are pretty challenging, but you have to kill the white Balverine to actually save the village, which is somewhat fun. But after you're done with that, this is where the next main highlight of the story comes in. After you're done saving the village, they end up giving you a key to go to the arena, pretty much like a pass to go inside and actually fight in the games. This is one of the more entertaining, but also one of the most frustrating parts of the game come into play. So pretty much what you have to do is head in and pretty much win the game in the arena. And you get to meet a whole bunch of different heroes that actually have played in the games. You also find out that your mother was part of these games and she won before as well. And this is where you meet one of the other characters that play a huge role throughout the game, is Jack of Blades. This guy's more of a mysterious type, doesn't really give you that much information on who he is and pretty much what his purpose is throughout the game, until later on you actually find out who he is and more about him. It's honestly one of the more entertaining spots, but like I said, it can be very frustrating depending on how greedy you are. So you pretty much have to fight through 9 games of in the arena and kill a whole bunch of enemies. But if you want to get a lot of gold, you have to stay in and keep playing the game. But if you feel like you're going to die, you have to step out and come back in once you get your potions and stuff. Now the issue I have is I was too greedy, so I died 3 different times throughout this, just trying to collect loot. And one thing that's different from this one and the other ones, this is the only game that you can actually die and have to restart. In the other 2, if you die, you just come back to life no matter what. You lose some experience, but with this game, if you're dead, you're dead. Unless you have the revive potions, then you are not coming back. So there is one other major thing that happens during this arena fight, is that you end up fighting with Whisper for the last couple rounds, and then you have to decide if you want to kill her or not. This is somewhat important depending on which one you decide to pick. So if you end up deciding to keep her alive for the good ending, you get to keep your gold upon death. But if you end up killing her, you'll lose all your gold upon death. So you pretty much have to decide that. But aside from that, it doesn't really play that major of a role. It changes some dialogue, like with Thunder. Thunder is more upset with you because you killed his sister, but he'll also be upset with you for beating her in the arena. So it's kind of like a whatever. You just have to decide which one you think is more important. Like if you end up keeping her alive, she doesn't come back in the later of the game. She ends up going back to her homeland. So it really does not matter. The implication is that she ends up leaving no matter what. So killing her, personally, I just did it because I don't care. I wanted the money, and plus, she wasn't a nice person to your character, so I didn't really feel all too bad for killing her. Around this time, you'll now notice that your character is starting to look like they're aging, and this happens with every type of experience points that are spent. Your character will age each and every time you spend some, which is kind of an interesting way of doing it. I wish more games would do it this way, but if you don't like the character being this old, you can go to the Temple of Avo, which will be found in Witchwood, and if you donate enough money, you will actually de-age a little bit, which is an awesome way of dealing with it. It's pretty expensive, so we'll go into some cheese stuff if you really are interested on this. There is a lot of bugs in this game, and I mean crazy ones. Like for like currency wise, once you can get to North Bowerstone, which you will be able to get to after you finish this quest, you will meet Lady Grey, and Lady Grey is interested in you and not really into Thunder anymore. So if once you talk to her, she'll actually let you go to North Bowerstone, and when you get there, there's like some crazy cheese glitches with like the trading system, which I'll show on screen right now. And there's also like things like where you can get to find a weapon in the game literally before you even get to the ending. It's kind of insane, but you know, this is the type of glitches that you'll find throughout the game. And sometimes it's beneficial to do them because honestly, the grind in this game is somewhat insane, mostly when it comes to experience points. Even with like 300 to 400,000 experience points, you are still not going to be done with using your spells, like the upgrades for that area, which is kind of insane at that point because, you know, that's thousands of hours worth of time. Not really, I'm over exaggerating, but it still is a long amount of time to be spending in this game, mostly after like all quests are done and all that. But if you really want to keep grinding it normally, you don't have to follow these. Well, while we're on the conversation of Lady Grey, there's also another aspect to this game, and that is the relationship system. So pretty much if a character loves you enough, you can either get married or do whatever you want to do, honestly, with the character, depending on who you're interested in. You can pretty much start a relationship with that character. Personally, I took Lady Grey from Thunder because, you know, I'm on that evil route, so I don't really care about his feelings or anything like that. So you have to do a couple minor quests, at least for her relationship. So pretty much all you have to do is get her a rose and pretty much find her a necklace and then end up fighting Thunder. This fight with Thunder is honestly pretty easy at this point in time because my character is way over leveled at this point. So pretty much I just like waffle stomped the shit out of him. He didn't really have much of a chance against me. All I really did was use the same spell over and over again, and he pretty much died in 2 seconds. That's another thing you'll notice throughout this game is honestly the boss fights are very boring, it seems, because they're all pretty much really easy, and I don't blame it on the game. Maybe it's just because I'm a little too over level for the areas I'm supposed to be at, which kind of sucks, but at the same time, it really is up to you how much you level your character or like how fast you're leveling it. I did do a little bit of cheese with the powers at least because those ones take a long time to get. But aside from that, I played normally for like the combat and stuff, and I was still able to get to that level where I was still beating him up even without like any type of cheese. But let's get back into the relationships. Honestly, the relationships in this game aren't all too interesting compared to like the second and third one. In the second and third one, you can actually have like children and stuff, and so it actually plays a major role. And those kids can grow up, and even in the third one, you can end up doing quests with the child, which is really fun. And I'm hoping in the newest iteration of the game that we'll be able to play and have children and stuff, and maybe they'll be able to grow to your age, like 18 or something like that, and you can actually use them as like a companion. That'd be awesome. I don't know how complicated it would be to set this up, but I would really enjoy the feature of that. But in this game, it's honestly not all too interesting. It's one of the more side things that you can just kind of do if you want to. So after you're done marrying or deciding whatever fate you want to for Lady Grey, you end up heading to find your sister, and she talks to you about how Jacob Blades actually is the person that captured your mother and actually removed her eyes. After you have that conversation, she tells you to go and find the archaeologist. Once you head back to Bowerstone, you find out that he has been captured by his new mechanical bird type enemies, and you just have to fight through a whole bunch of them until you get to the docks. And once you talk to him, the archaeologist is actually the person that tells you how to get into the prison where your mother is captured. And it's one of the more challenging areas to get to. You fight through a whole bunch of undead in the cemetery, and you fight like hundreds of them at this point. Like there's hundreds in your way. You just keep fighting through them until you get to the end where you actually find your mother. Once you actually get to the mother, you end up having a conversation about how she doesn't want you to be there because he fears that, you know, like worst come to worst, you're not supposed to be there. She doesn't want you to get hurt. And right after you two try to escape, you both end up getting captured. Once this scene happens, one of the interesting aspects of the game happens where pretty much there is a time that you can end up spending in prison. There is a race that you have to do to try to escape, and if you get to the end of the race, you can try to escape, but it only happens once every year. So pretty much after you do the race, there's like a book that you have to open, and depending on which book you open, decides if you're going to escape that year. It took me 2 tries to actually escape, so I ended up having to wait there a whole year for your character until I got to the key in the second book. Once you get it, you end up fighting out of the cells with the inmates that are around you. If you want to let them out, you can actually just leave them in there if you want to. But once you free them or whatever may be, you end up heading back to your mother and you let her go, and you both end up escaping, which leads to another one of those boss fights where you end up fighting like this kraken looking creature. It's kind of cool, but he's a pretty easy boss, just like most of the other ones. After you end up dealing with him, you both escape. So pretty much around this time, you end up finding out that your sister gets captured. Yes, they get captured a lot throughout this game. You end up helping your mother find a portal to get to Hook Coast, is where your sister is at. And pretty much what you do is you fight your way through a whole bunch of enemies at Hook Coast, but right after you find out it is actually a trap. Maze is there, and he ends up being a villain of the story, which was somewhat of a twist, but at the same time, his reasoning around it kind of made no sense. He just said he was scared of Jack of Blades or whatever. But that was pretty much his whole reasoning around doing what he did. And pretty much what you have to do is kill him. And the issue is Jack of Blades now has the key to pretty much take the Sword of Aeons, which is the most powerful sword in the land, I guess, from what they say, even though it's weaker than one of the other swords, but we'll go with it. But because Jack of Blades ended up getting the key, he pretty much made all hell break loose. A whole bunch of enemies start spawning everywhere, same with allies, and everyone's pretty much just fighting to the death. It's honestly a chaotic but fun scene. You have to go through multiple different portals, going to different gateways that you have fought at, and I've explored at least throughout the story, which is really fun. And it pretty much is an absolute shit show. You just keep chasing after him, he keeps taunting you, and it ends up with you guys at the last one where sadly your mother ends up passing, and then it leads to you going back to the Heroes Guild. And this is where the final boss fight goes. Pretty much when you get in there, he isn't that hard of a boss, honestly. He's one of those ones that take like 5 to 10 seconds depending on. If you have like really good abilities by this point in time, he's a really quick boss to fight. He's kind of gimmicky, so you pretty much spend the next like maybe 2 to 3 minutes fighting him, and after you beat him, you get to decide the last decision in the game. And this decision honestly is the biggest one in the game. Either you get to keep the Swords of Aeon, and that means that you have to kill your sister, or you can throw it into the fire and pretty much destroy it. So pretty much some Lord of the Rings type of shit going on. But because I was going for an evil playthrough, I ended up keeping it and I murdered the sister. Honestly, the ending of this game was very anticlimactic, at least in my opinion. There wasn't all too much of an interest there. I mean, at least it was the biggest decision that you get to make throughout the game. The sword's not all too great, honestly. Just using the Solaris sword is 10 times better than this one, but we'll go with it. But depending on which one you get, is just whatever one you think is most satisfying. But when you get into the Lost Books is where like the rest of the plot comes in, and honestly this should have been in the base game because it adds a lot of plot to the game. So pretty much what ends up happening is you head into the DLC, and there's a girl named Briar Rose. You see her a couple times throughout the story in the base game. She's not all too interesting of a character, but once you actually get into the DLC, she plays a lot more of a major role. Once you get into the DLC, you have to open this demon door that will only open to you because you have Jack's mask, so you have to show it to the door, and once you go in, this is where the first morality thing plays in. Morality in the DLC is a lot more important, and it actually has a lot more bigger decisions than what the base game had. And right off the bat, you have to decide if the monks that are inside are worthy of living or dying. It's all up to you. Either if you put sun, they get to survive. If you put the moon, they die. No matter what the outcome is you get the key, but one is eviler than the other. Once you're done wrapping up getting the key, you head back to where you went at the end of the game, and it takes you to the Lost Bay. And once you get to the Lost Bay, you meet another character named Scythe, and he tells you about the situation that's going on with like Jack of Blades coming back and stuff like that, and he's pretty much like the all-knowing, I guess you can go with it. And pretty much you just fight through a whole bunch of enemies throughout the way, and you end up at the Snowspire village, and this is where they pretty much tell you what your final quest is, and that's to defeat Jack of Blades again. And this is where another one of the morality things play into it. You cannot fight him until you gather 3 hero souls. And this is one of the more interesting decisions throughout the game. Honestly, this is my personal favorite decisions that you get to make. So pretty much what you get to decide is if you want to get the souls from the living or the dead. If you pick living, like when you go and meet with Thunder, you have to either kill Thunder or go kill an undead warrior that is in the arena. Personally, like I said, I'm going for the evil ending, so I kill Thunder and I take his soul. After you take his, you head back and you talk to Briar, and she's like, okay, we need 2 more souls. One was your mother's, or you can kill me. And she says, don't kill her. But of course, I ended up murdering her, and I took her soul and put it in. The evil ending, honestly, is the fastest route, but I ended up killing her, taking it, and I headed off to the last one, which will be the Guildmaster, or you can go kill a different one and capture that soul. The kill on the Guildmaster is absolutely fucking insane.
For all of us, please, let me teleport you to the graveyard. Take Nostro's soul instead. Very well, hero. Do your worst. I am no defenseless old man. I have powers that you can't begin to...
The way you like beat him up at the end was the most entertaining thing, but you end up killing him and you take his soul back and you put it in, and it leads to the door opening, and this is where the last decision of the game comes in. This decision honestly is one of the more important ones, actually the most important in the game. Yeah, after you fight Jack of Blades, which is now a dragon for some reason. We'll just go with it. I'm not sure why he's a dragon in this one, but yeah, he ends up becoming a dragon. You end up fighting him, and at the end, you get to decide if you want to keep Jack of Blades' mask or to throw it into the fire. This one is honestly up to you. I ended up keeping it, and once you put it on, you can never take it off. So that's like the one defect. You can't wear helmets anymore or anything like that. But if you throw it into the fire, it's destroyed. So you know which one's the good one and the evil one. So pretty much Jack of Blades comes back if you put it back on, and if you throw it into the fire, he's gone forever. The real canon ending is Jack of Blade getting destroyed and you never taking the sword. You destroying the sword is the base ending, because Fable 2 leads with your sister being like the leading protagonist that tells the main character where to go throughout the second one, and same with the third one. Which kind of sucks, because at the end of all of this, you actually find out that your decisions didn't really matter, because one's pretty much a folktale and one's like the true ending, which the hero ending is truly the ending in each and every game, which kind of sucks, because then what was the point of having a morality system if it never really truly changes anything? At least that's how I feel, in my opinion. But overall, this is still one of my favorite RPGs I've ever played. It is so entertaining. It has some of the best side quests I've ever played, some of the best combat I ever played through as well, and one of the more interesting stories, even though the morality isn't as exciting as you would think it is. Like, don't get me wrong, certain things do play a huge role, but some of them just kind of fall flat. The only other issue I ever really had, like I said, was the bosses. They weren't all too interesting or exciting, and it doesn't really get better from here. I'm not gonna lie with you, Fable 2 didn't do all too well on bosses, and neither did 3. I think 3 had the most enticing or interesting storytelling bosses, but it still had some of the worst bosses I've seen in video games, but that's completely fine as long as the plot is fine and the combat and the story can keep you enticed the whole time is all that really matters to me, and this game does that perfectly, at least in my opinion. The only other positives I really want to throw in at the end is honestly the soundtrack of the whole game is really entertaining. It has a lot more whimsy or cheery type music, but also the creepy stuff that's thrown into the side depending on what locations you're on. honestly some of the best music I've ever heard in a video game. It's one of my personal favorites, and I could go back and listen to it at any point in time. Mostly like the introduction music, like in Fable 2 or in Fable 1. It just sounds awesome, and every time I hear it, it's like a nostalgia hit each and every time.
And so our story begins.
In Fable 2, right off the bat, when you get into it, you get to decide something that you couldn't in the prior game. If you want to be a male or a female. Honestly, this was a great idea to add this feature because in the first game, it's kind of hard to pull in a female audience when you only can play as a male, because it's really hard to picture yourself as a character like this. But let's get into the game. The first thing you see is a bird flying around Bowerstone. Bowerstone is from the prior game, and it is now completely different than what it was before. And you can really tell how much of like a graphical upgrade this game was to the first game. And honestly, it's really cool to see the city and how much it evolved over the last 500 years. Everything is completely different. But then you get to finally meet your character, which gets hit by a piece of poop.
Oh, what was that? Oh, yuck. Well, I hear that's lucky. Like finding a four-leaf clover.
After your character gets hit by a piece of poop, you get to meet your sister, Rose. You and Rose end up heading towards the market to see pretty much what is going on with all the commotion around the town. Once you guys head towards it, you end up meeting a merchant that is pretty much a scam artist. But this guy has a whole bunch of different trinkets that he's trying to sell that are completely bogus.
This is truly a magical mirror. For as long as you look into it, it will make you beautiful.
I'll take it.
Very wise. Now, just remember, the magic only works if you look at it in complete darkness.
During this whole ordeal, you end up hearing something about a magic box. Your sister doesn't actually think it works, so she thinks all this stuff in there is actually just pieces of junk. But the girl right beside you, this older lady, ends up telling you that it might actually have some value. And it might actually work. You just have to try to test it out. And that old lady ends up being Teresa, which is the main character in the first game's sister. How is she still alive? It's been 500 years? I don't know. Magic? After Teresa talks to you, she ends up telling you to pretty much go and find 5 pieces of gold so that you can end up paying for the music box. So pretty much what you have to do at this point is just run around and do a whole bunch of quests for random people around the town. This is where the morality system comes back into play from the prior game. The most major side quest that is at the beginning of the game to get a gold piece is definitely the warrants that you have to collect for a guard. So pretty much what you're doing is running around just collecting papers that flew around the map while doing these other side quests on the side. And while you're on your way through, you end up seeing a dog getting attacked by a bully. Your sister tries to stand up to him and ends up getting her shit rocked by him, which is pretty awesome. So you end up having to go up to her and save her and the dog. And after you're done doing that, your sister says she didn't need help. Okay, whatever you want to say. And then the dog ends up taking a liking to you and your sister because you ended up protecting him. And he kind of follows you around the map at this point. After you're done helping the dog, you end up going on to doing the last couple side quests, which one is where you go shoot beetles or you break crates, depending on what type of morality you're going for. But after you're done doing all those, you end up heading back to the guard, and this is where one of the major decisions come in. Either you can give the guard the warrants that you've been collecting around the map, or you can give it to this thug that's in an alley. And depending on which one you pick, it has major consequences later on in the game, which I will go into later. Now that you collected the last coin, you end up heading back to the music box and you buy it from the guy. And you bring it back to where your house is near. And then this happens. So after you guys make the wish, the music box ends up disappearing. So Rose ends up being really disappointed, thinking that nothing really happened. Her whole wish was to pretty much live in Fairfax Castle because you two are homeless. So after that happened, she felt like she wasted 5 gold on nothing. So you two head back to your house and go to bed. So after sleeping for a bit, you abruptly get woken up by 2 guards and they invite you to Fairfax Castle. So Rose's wish truly did come true. Once you guys get there, you get a little bit of a tour of the castle, and then you get to meet Lord Lucian. Lord Lucian is pretty much on edge the whole time while you're talking to him, and you guys pretty much become his test subject. He pretty much tries to test out to see if you guys are heroes or not, and he can't really come to a decisive conclusion, so he ends up doing this.
I can't allow you to live either. I'm sorry.
Honestly, this introduction to the game was amazing. Compared to the first game had a good and intriguing intro that pulled you in really good, but this game it hits every nail that I want. Like, this has great cinematics, it has a decent intro to the game, and the story just pulls you in immediately. So I literally just wanted to see what was going to happen right after this, just because of how compelling the story was. The story picks up again when you wake up in Bower Lake in a gypsy camp. You end up talking to Teresa again, and she tells you about a couple supplies that she left in a chest near your house. After you get your supplies, she ends up telling you to head into an old hero's cave to pretty much fulfill your destiny. So you end up heading down there and fighting a whole bunch of different types of enemies like beetles, bandits, stuff like that, until you end up getting to the end of the tomb, and this is where you get to pick your first power. The will in this game has definitely downgraded from the first game. I'm not sure what even happened. There was so many different types of spells and stuff in the first game, and this game pretty much took a huge shit on that and decided we're gonna cut it down to like a minimum of a certain amount of spells. But don't get me wrong, the spells are 10 times more OP in this game, but there's just not that much of a variety like in the first one. And same with like the physical or the accuracy attributes. None of them really got an upgrade from the first game, but at least now you can upgrade it in your pause menu, unlike having to go all the way back to the spawn and the leveling up there. Once you're out of the cave, you get XP, and the XP kind of works like the first game, where the XP can be spent on melee, accuracy, or will, but you only collect it depending on what type of attacks you're doing. So if you're using a melee weapon, of course you're going to be getting melee XP. Same with if you're using a pistol or a crossbow, you're going to be getting that type of XP, and the will of course give you will XP. The green XP is used for all arounders depending on what you want to spend it on. I honestly enjoyed how they set it up in the first game, and I really like it in the second game. I think the XP was done really well, and I like how it's based on what type of attacks you're doing. So it's meaningful for whatever weapon you're using to be using it for that type of XP. But after you end up heading out, you end up heading to a guard that is protecting Bowerstone. And once you get to that guard, he tells you cannot enter Bowerstone because there is a bandit named Thag that is stopping pretty much any type of like movement into the town. So you have to head towards Thag and take him out at his base. Once you head over to Thag, you fight a couple of bandits, but then your dog gets kicked the shit out of by Thag, and this is where another thing that comes in is your dog can get wounded during fights, so you need to make sure that you have elixirs for him to heal as well, not just for yourself in this game. And after you end up fighting Thag, it comes into another moral question of what you want to do in the situation. Either you can end up saving the people that are in the cages, or you can give the key back to the slave owners so that they will stay as slaves. I end up killing the slave owner, and I let the people out of the cage and then head back towards Bowerstone. After you're done dealing with Thag, you can finally head into the town. Once you head into Bowerstone, you find out another thing, which is Renown. Renown is used for a couple different things, but we'll get into that later once it actually becomes important to the story. But once you head in, you can wait 5 minutes to see Teresa because she is running a little bit late, so you have to go do other stuff on the side. This is where one of the more important, or one of my favorite features comes into play, which is the job system. So you can head over to the blacksmith and work a job and make a certain amount of currency, because quests in this game actually do not give you any money this time around. So you have to actually go work for your money. So you can either do the blacksmithing job, you can work as a bartender, or you can be someone that cuts wood. While you're collecting the money, it's not only for different types of weapons this time around, you can also buy businesses. And businesses is one of the more important details to the game that I think is actually really fun, and I'm happy that they added this feature. So you can go up to any type of business that you want, and you can purchase them and decide what type of pricing that you have on the business, which I think is super fun for this type of game, and it works really well for like the RPG aspect. And once you actually get really into it, you can start making like natural income without even working, which is really entertaining, and they even do it 10 times better in the third game, but the way it's set up in this game was already fun on its own. After a bit of time, Teresa finally shows up and she brings you guys to a cliffside, and she pretty much tells you about the spire. After she tells you a bit about the spire, you find out that Lord Lucian has pretty much taken it over, and this is pretty much the place that ends up granting the wishes, and he's trying to rebuild it so he can make another wish. The wish that he's trying to bring back his family and pretty much becoming the ultimate superpower. So to pretty much stop him, Teresa gives you the task of finding 3 different heroes, which are the strength hero, the skill hero, and the will hero. The first one you're trying to look for is the strength hero, so you have to head toward Rook Ridge. But before you get to Rook Ridge, you actually head back to Old Town, where the game officially started. And this is where one of the key things that happened in the kid's life that affected the future of the game, which is really cool. Once you head to Old Town, either this place is going to be pretty much a rundown, crappy piece of the town, or it's going to be a beautiful, vibrant area when you head into it. And it really comes up to whatever decisions you made when you were younger with the warrants that you had. If you would have gave it to the thug, it would have ended up in a shitty place, but because if you give it to the guard, it ends up in a great place and everything looks nice, and plus you get a discount, which is awesome. What makes this feature so cool is this isn't the only part of the game that has it happen. It happens actually a couple times throughout the game, and I'm really enjoy it, and I hope in the next game that they bring it back. But let's get into Rook Ridge. So once you're heading into Rook Ridge, you pretty much run into a whole bunch of different bandits and stuff, and you just pretty much wipe them out just like anything else. And this is where you see your first demon door in the game, and the demon doors are just like the first game, but a lot more entertaining, at least in my opinion. I think the challenges and the puzzles that were in the first game were kind of simplistic, but with this one, they're a lot more fun. And it involves the dog a lot more, which makes the dog an actual useful asset throughout this game. Not only can the dog track treasure, it can attack enemies, but it also can do expressions that actually open certain demon doors, and it supports you in that. And I'm really happy they put so much time and effort into a new companion that they put into the game. But yeah, the demon doors are a lot more entertaining. Some of the different areas that you get to go to will look so much cooler. Like when you actually get into the demon doors, there's some cool environments, and they all have like their own personality, and I really like it. So pretty much after that, all you have to do is fight through Rook Ridge, so you kill a whole bunch of bandits on your way to Oakvale. After you're done killing every single bandit that you can see, once you get to Oakvale, this is where one of the renowned systems actually come into play. You end up meeting a monk up at the Temple of Light, and when you talk to him, he tells you you are not well known enough to help him with his quest. So this is where they kind of force you to go and play some side quests that are throughout the game, and you get to kind of decide which ones you're going to do. Like you can go to the Temple of Shadow and kill people for renown, or you can help kill this bandit so that you can build a bridge back to Bowerstone, or you can go help this guy make his ex commit suicide so that he feels better about himself. It's really up to you what you want to do. But there is some really interesting quests throughout this. But honestly, that's one of my favorite features about this game is the quests. A lot of the quests are really unique and a lot more enjoyable than the first one had. The boasting system I really truly do miss, but honestly the side quests in this game are a lot more entertaining than the first game had. Like every single one that I ended up playing were really engaging. Sure, there's not as many side quests it feels like that the first game had, but the side quests that there are in this game are at least really entertaining and pull you in throughout the whole thing. And honestly, I'm kind of happy they push you into doing them because a lot of them have some great highlights and they give you good rewards for finishing them. Not just renown, sometimes you can get something greater than that. Like in one you get a wife, and the others you can end up getting like gemstones and stuff that sell for a really high price range, which is really cool, and I really enjoy that. But let's get back onto the main story. So after you do a couple side quests, you can finally head back and talk to the monk, and this monk gives you a quest to pretty much bring the acorn back to life, which is a jab or joke at what they talked about previously in the first game where you could watch an acorn grow. So they're kind of making a joke on itself, and I really like that. But pretty much all you have to do is go meet with his daughter, Hannah. And once you meet with Hannah, you guys are pretty much filling up this urn with water to bring back and water the acorn. So you have to fight through a whole bunch of different enemies throughout the battles, and you end up finding out that she is actually the strength hero. So that is one positive to all this, and you have to pretty much give her the motivation to be that hero, because at the beginning she is like a pacifist, she doesn't like fighting, so you have to pretty much motivate her into it. But pretty much at the end of it, you don't even have to do it yourself. So after a little bit of killing the undead and getting to the end of it, a monk runs in and pretty much tells you that the temple is being attacked by a spire guard. So you have to rush back to it. But once you get there, the monk ends up getting shot and Hannah ends up getting her revenge. After the father gets shot and she gets her revenge, you end up having a funeral. And pretty much she gives a little bit of a speech about like how great her father was, and she kind of is upset with him though because she felt like she could have saved him, but he wouldn't let her. That's how she feels, at least at the time. She's very upset about it. And pretty much after this, Teresa comes and talks to her and tells her to pretty much join her at the Heroes Guild. So you guys are pretty much gathering the band together and getting ready for the next adventure. So after you go and talk to her again, you guys pretty much have a conversation about getting the Will Hero. And this is one of the more interesting parts of the story, at least in my opinion. You have to head into Brightwood and kill a whole bunch of enemies. And after you get through a whole bunch of Spire guards or whatever may be that's in the area, you guys head in to get the Will Hero, and the Will Hero ends up getting captured by one of the Spire guards higher ups, like a lieutenant. And after he steals him, you guys pretty much lost the objective, and you guys don't really know where to go from here, at least for the time being. So after you lose the Will Hero, you guys pretty much regroup and try to find a different way of getting to Lucien and pretty much breaking him out. So you have to go and meet with his old butler, which will be in a bar in Bowerstone Market. Pretty much either you can threaten, kill him, or just give him the $1,000 that he wants. I end up just giving him the $1,000 because whatever. And he gives you a letter to pretty much tell you where his diaries are. So you have to head towards, pretty much, it's right outside of the Heroes Guild, a troll, and you just fight the troll. What you'll find out is that the bosses are stupid easy, just like in the first game, and even in the third game. He takes like 2 seconds to kill, and after you kill him, he gives you one of the diaries. You cannot read him personally, so you have to bring him back to Teresa. After you bring him back to Teresa, she ends up telling you that you guys have to head off to Westcliff because this is where he is hiring different guards from the arena. The arena is one of my personal favorite places in the game, and we'll get into that once we actually get there. What you have to do at this point in time is fight through Bandit Coast and the other parts of Westcliff. So you'll fight a whole bunch of different types of bandits, and this is the first time you fight a Highwayman, and he's pretty easy just like the rest of the enemies. What you'll find out throughout this whole game is it is actually 10 times easier than the first game, and even deaths and stuff aren't all too important in this game either. If you die in this game, you just come back no matter what. Like there's no like, oh, you lost, you have to start at a checkpoint. No. You just come back, you lose a bit of an experience, and that's pretty much it. You go right back into fighting. It's honestly pretty disappointing, and it was one of my least favorite parts about this game. Even the third game's the same way, where death really does not matter anymore. So pretty much you can just keep running and gunning and just getting through the story no matter what you're doing. Like, you could be one of the worst players in the world and you can still get through it. And I'm guessing this is Lionhead's idea of how to get more people to come and play the game, but honestly it's one of my least favorite parts of the game because it's just too easy. And I wish there was like a difficulty slider to try to fix this. Like in the first game they kind of did that with like the boasting system, but without it, now it's just like basic, just run and gun pretty much through every enemy. But after you fight through a decent amount of bandits and stuff and get to Westcliff, you end up meeting a lady that needs to find her child, and she brings you into a Balverine cave, and pretty much you just kill her and the other Balverines. Honestly, the Balverines are 10 times easier in this game compared to the first game, and you'll notice that with almost every enemy that you do fight. But once you actually head into Westcliff, you can't get into the arena just like the last place, just because you're not well known enough, so you're forced into doing side quests again. One of the cool things though is if you go up the hill, you can meet with the old guy that took your pictures, and also rebuilt the bridge to Bowerstone. And if you give him a certain amount of money, he will actually rebuild this town, and he'll end up paying you back for doing so. Another cool thing is there's a shooting range off to the side, and if you end up getting first place, you get a really good pistol in the game, and I would highly recommend to go for it because it obliterates enemies, as long as you have like your accuracy and stuff leveled up a little bit. But after that, you just head off and do a decent amount of side quests, and then you head back to the arena. And this is honestly the only part of the game that I usually die at, because the arena has somewhat difficult enemies. At least not through this playthrough though. I just kind of breeze through it, because once you actually do a little bit of leveling, unlike I did as a kid, I would just get shit on nonstop because I wouldn't level up. But, you know, as I gotten older, this part is a breeze. You just run through it. It's pretty much just like the first game. Every single game that they made has some type of arena that you fight through. And it's pretty basic in this one. I do enjoy playing through it. And if you enjoy playing it enough, you can actually keep going through it as many times as you want, which I really enjoy. But after you kill everything in the arena, you pretty much get a pass to go join Lord Lucian's army. So you have to head down to the docks. And before you do this, just telling you, every side quest, there is certain side quests that are very important to get done. So you have to go back and do those, or there's going to be consequences for your action. I'm not even joking you. This game actually has consequences for actually progressing the story, and I really enjoy that. So if you decide to help the Temple of Light for the side story, this will affect them in the future, or if you help the Temple of Shadow, this will affect their future in the game. And it's honestly really cool. Same with like there's this random farmer that you talk to. You wouldn't think that his side quest is all too important, but if you don't do it, it's going to have massive consequences later on in the story. So after you get all those wrapped up, you can head onto the boat. You should probably say goodbye to your family before doing this, get their love up, or they might divorce you during your time away. And honestly, I'll go into relationships after we get done with this area, but all this stuff is pretty important. You're going to be gone for a long time, so expect change. Now we're on to the Spire. This place looks so fucking cool from the outside and on the inside as well. It has like an awesome cinematic before you actually get into it, and it's one of my favorite cutscenes and also one of my favorite locations I've seen in any video game. Once you actually get into it, it is very dark and has an awesome atmosphere, at least in my opinion. Literally right off the boat though, you are already getting pushed around by the other guards that work there, and pretty much you're treated like a prisoner, and so are all the other people that get off the boat. You meet one dude and he's kind of cool. He's one of the only other people that actually want to talk to you, and you know, adds a little bit of light to the area, and he's one of the new guards as well. But once you actually go up a flight of stairs, you end up seeing Lucian again, and he puts you all to sleep. Once you wake up, you pretty much have nothing. You can't even use your willpower. You have a collar on now, so you legit have to listen to any order that you're given or you're punished. So your first order is to go and see the lieutenant. Once you see the Commandant, pretty much he tells you that you are pretty much under his control, and he shows you that right off the bat. He literally tells you to listen and obey to anything that he says. So he starts whooping the shit out of your character, and if you do not thank him for whooping your ass, he will actually take experience away from your character. So at this point in time, honestly, I just listen to him and I just keep saying thank you to him so I don't lose any type of experience. If you want to do something else, you can just try to resist him, but it's honestly useless at this point in time to resist him. So he will just keep whooping your ass for the next like 2 to 3 minutes, and after that he is pretty much pleased with you because, you know, you listen to his orders as he gives them to you. But after that, you end up staying for a little bit longer, and time will pass really fast throughout this part. So once you go and sleep, you will be months ahead of where you were last time. And pretty much the same thing happens. He gives you an order, and this order this time is to watch on some prisoners, and you get to decide if you want to be good or evil. This will give you negative effects if you do not feed these prisoners, because, you know, it is pretty much technically an evil thing to do. But at the same time, if you do feed the prisoners, you will lose experience, but you will gain goodwill. So depending on what type of character you're playing, you're going to have to screw yourself if you are a good hero. And pretty much I was too, so I ended up losing a lot of experience. I even ended up losing a level up because of this scene, because I ended up wanting to help the people that were in the prison. So you really have to take everything with a grain of salt of what you decide to do at this point in time. If you are a good hero, this part is going to be an absolute pain in the ass, but if you're a villain, this part is an absolute breeze for you. After you do this part, you either pass out or you get sent back to go rest in your room. And pretty much all that happens is another time frame happens where it's a couple months, and then you have to go and see the Commandant again. And once you see him again, you end up seeing the guard that you guys were talking to at the beginning, and he's absolutely batshit insane now. He pretty much went insane from being in there and, you know, getting punished by the Commandant over and over again, to the point where he literally doesn't listen to orders anymore. He's just insane now. And his next order is for you to kill him, and this is another good or evil part. If you kill him, you end up getting negative, you know, to your morality, but if you end up attacking the Commandant or deciding not to attack either of them, you end up gaining good energy. So depending on what you're going for, this is one of the more major things as well. I ended up just attacking the Commandant, which was kind of funny. You lose a lot of experience, like I said before, so if you're fine with that punishment, you can go right ahead with whatever you want to do. But he ends up making you pass out if you decide not to attack him, and then literally years pass by at this point. They give you like a time frame, and it ends up being like 10 years after all this started, and your character starts to lose hope because, you know, you've been stuck there for so long, and it's honestly insane. But one of the things that happened throughout the 10 years is the Spire has expanded because all the prisoners that are there are working on rebuilding the Spire. So there's a lot of differences within the Spire now, and like a new wing has been made. When the new wing was made, one of the guards ended up going missing, and he hasn't reported back in, so the Commandant orders you to go and check out this area and find the new prisoner guard that went missing. The one thing I don't really get, though, is if you're being a good hero, I don't understand why you haven't been punished or killed at this point in time, because if you are willing to break his rules, why does he trust you to go and, you know, check out this location? It really didn't make any sense throughout the story, but it's whatever. If that's what they want to go with, they can do whatever they want with the story. But you end up going to the wing, and you find the Will Hero is here hiding, and he ends up removing your collar so you can use your magic again. The Will Hero has been pretty much in a cell this whole time and been talking to you every single time about like the escape and how you shouldn't even be there. But after he ends up freeing the collar from you, you guys end up fighting through a whole bunch of Spire guards throughout the place until you get to the Commandant. And this guy is a pretty big pain in the ass to fight. Honestly, he's one of the harder bosses in the game. And when you actually fight him, he actually does damage, and he will probably kill you. I died to him twice, honestly, and he's actually pretty strong. Like, he has power, like he can use magic, and he also is really good at melee, so he will whoop your ass if you're not careful with him. But after you end up killing him, the Will Hero ends up stealing all of his power and puts it back into him, and this is where you pretty much try to escape the island. So you guys head back to where the docks were, where you first came in, and you just blow up a whole bunch of ships and kill a whole bunch of enemies and escape with a whole bunch of other people that just arrived at the area. Once you end up heading back, you head back to Oakvale, and this is where a lot changes. So once you and Garth end up getting off the boat, Teresa immediately after steals Garth and they head back to the Heroes Guild with Hannah, or Hammer, whatever you want to call her. But pretty much at this point in time, they tell you to go around and check out what all has changed. If you end up heading to the Temple of Light, it's completely different. It has completely expanded since the last time you have been there. Same with that farmer that you ended up helping. His farm is now absolutely huge. There's a whole bunch of expansions that happen in that area. Also, if you head to West Cliff, where you ended up investing, the whole place looks completely different. There's no more bandits there anymore. It's all just civilized people. And he also gives you a $15,000 reward for even, investing in it. And that's honestly one of my favorite features. Is this whole thing just is awesome, seeing everything getting built and expanded upon depending on what your decisions are, because if you end up going with a completely different route, it's going to look completely different to what you did now. And I really like that, and I wish other games would do this because it honestly adds to the story building and the lore of the story. And I hope the next game that they end up coming out with is the exact same, but I'm not all too sure if it will be. One of the only other major features that ends up happening at this point in time is if you head back to your kid, now he will be fully grown up, and it's one of the coolest features in the game. Once you actually see the kid again, he will be around 8 to 10 years old, and it honestly adds to the immersion of this game. It's really cool to see that they actually age throughout time, and it's awesome to see like all this other stuff that happens. Like if you end up not paying attention to the kid, or if you leave for a little bit, you can come back and the kid will actually go on his own quest that you have to go and help him and save him from, like getting hurt and stuff like that. And I really enjoy it. And I hope in the next game they really expand on this feature, because it's really cool to be able to build your own family and have like cool, unique features to them. Sadly, the dialogue tree to the relationships aren't all too interesting. It's literally just them complaining about you leaving or you coming back over and over again. So it's not all too interesting on that aspect, but it's awesome that they were able to add like children that are a little bit more expansive than the first game had. But let's get back onto the main story. You end up heading back to the Heroes Guild, and Garth, Hammer, and then Teresa are talking about where you're going to head next to find the last hero, the hero of skill. This hero is hiding off in where Oakvale used to be, which is one of the destroyed towns now. So you have to end up going back to Brightwood to get there, and pretty much you have to fight through a whole bunch of Spire guards that are defending it, and then Garth makes a portal for you to get into. So you have to fight and pretty much protect him throughout this time. And it's honestly a pretty fun fight for me. I thought it was pretty cool just fighting through a whole bunch of enemies with other companions. And I wish they had more companions throughout each game where you kind of like fight together instead of just being like solo fighting. At least I think it makes it a little bit more immersive and fun, at least in my opinion. But after you end up fighting through a whole bunch of enemies, you end up jumping to the portal. You and your dog are the only ones that end up making it through, and you are now in Wraith Marsh. Once you head into Wraith Marsh, this place is completely destroyed. It is one of the more depressing areas that you end up getting into, and immediately after you get out of the portal, you pass out and you are put into a cage by some random dude. And he ends up going to talk to you, and this ends up happening to him.
Reckon I'll burn you as well. No! No, please!
After the guy runs into the fog and dies, your dog finally finds you and ends up going and grabbing the key off of the dude that's holding you prisoner and gives you the key to let you out. After you guys get out, you pretty much have to break through Wraith Marsh and make your way to Bloodstone Village. And pretty much this whole fight area is kind of cool. You fight a whole bunch of undead and a new enemy called the Wraiths. Those are pretty cool. They bring in like these ghostly children that end up attacking you, and they do a shit ton of damage. So you have to make sure to keep your like distance from them. But after you end up fighting through them, you do see a couple cool Easter eggs from the first game, like Oakvale. You get to see it completely destroyed, and it even gives you some implications of the reasoning around why they were destroyed, and it's honestly pretty cool. I honestly like the area a decent amount, but I feel like it was a lot more empty compared to a lot of the other areas in the game, but at least it had some types of stuff that were making it a little bit more enticing to make you at least enjoy the area that you end up fighting through. But after you do that, you end up heading into Bloodstone Village, and you finally get to meet the last hero, the skill hero.
Exactly like you, sir. In 3 months, the picture will be developerized and...
3 months? That's no good.
Reaver is by far one of my favorite characters throughout every Fable game, and honestly, one of the things I really enjoy about Fable 2 is the cast. Honestly, most of them are really good, and most of them are very enticing to listen to. Mostly Reaver. Reaver is more of a blunt character that will pretty much do whatever he wants, and he'll kill you for whatever may be. It could be the slightest thing to one of the more major things. It really does not matter to this guy, and that's why he's one of the best written characters in the series. But pretty much all you have to do is, before he will even help you, is of course you have to go do a side quest and become more well known, because I guess you're not well known enough in Bloodstone, so you have to go around and do more shit. So you run back and do more side quests, and then you can come back to him, and he actually gives you a quest before he will even help you. And this quest is pretty major depending on what ending you want to have. So pretty much what he tells you to do is bring the seal to this old tomb, and once you end up doing that, you fight a decent amount of enemies, and then you get into a room, and this is where you get to decide a fate for another character. So you end up meeting this random lady that's been crying in this room, and there's 3 people talking to you, and you find out that Reaver has had a deal to expand his life, so he's been alive for hundreds of years. And he's actually one of the main reasons why Oakvale ended up in the state that it is now. So pretty much you have to decide if this lady will lose her youth, or you will lose your youth. Personally, I wanted to stay young, so I ended up screwing her over, and she ends up becoming old and raggedy. You never see her again, so it doesn't really matter. So it's really up to you if you want to ruin your character's youth or theirs. I don't even think you get any negative traits to this part, which I honestly like, because I don't think this is one of the more hard decisions to make throughout the game. But after you do that, you end up heading back to Reaver. But before we get back to there, I want to talk about some of the other things before we get near the end of this video, and that is the collectibles in this game. There's something called the gargoyles that you end up fighting in this game. You get it from using your accuracy skill from just leveling it up, and they're pretty much just like little gimmicky enemies that you can just shoot and break the heads off of, but there's actually a useful purpose to them. If you end up shooting out the heads, if you end up getting 10 of them, you can open a chest, and there's like this gargoyle cave, so if you end up killing all of them, there's like a major reward at the end. Some of them are good, and then there's some that are, yeah. But the only other major thing I pretty much completely forgot to talk about is the expressions. The expression system is honestly great in this game. It's 10 times better than the first game, and it's way better than what the third did as well. It's overall just a really easy way of using it. It just has like a wheel that you go through, and you get to decide what you want to do. Depending on what type of character you are, you can either be really nice or funny, quote unquote, or you can be evil depending on what you're trying to go for. Now, the only thing that really sucks though is if you're way too nice with the villagers, they will follow you around, and they get really fucking annoying. Can you people move the fuck out of my way? Holy shit, dude. But let's get back onto the main story. After you end up returning back to Reaver, you find out that he betrays you to Lord Lucian. What a surprise, really. You wouldn't expect anything else from Reaver, but he ends up getting attacked by Lucian, which is also like, what were you expecting? Were you expecting him to just let you leave? So he ends up attacking the city, and you two have to escape in his tunnel that he has in his base. So you guys end up heading into the caves, and you fight a decent amount of Spire enemies before you end up escaping out of the caves, and it ends up blowing up. And you fight one of the quote-unquote bosses that are in the game. It's literally just one of those shards, but just a lot bigger than the other ones. And it's pretty easy. All you have to do is shoot the orb on the top and you destroy it. But after you do that, you head back to the Heroes Guild, and this is where pretty much the end game starts. You start sucking in the power from all the other heroes into you, but then Lucian somehow, I don't even know how this happens, spawns right on top of you guys and ends up shooting your dog. That's pretty cool. So your dog ends up dying right here, and then he steals all the other people that are there and then shoots you. Now this leads into one of the cooler sections of the game, and this is like the dream sequence. So pretty much throughout the dream, it's honestly pretty positive. It's literally just you and your sister doing a whole bunch of activities together, just like what you wish life would have ended up being. You guys just like live on a little farm and you guys just do activities throughout the dream, but it's honestly just a constant loop. If you end up failing this part, you will get looped back and have to redo it over and over again until you finish the day right. So all you have to do is collect chicken, kill beetles on the farm, and shoot bottles. If you're able to do that at night when you guys go to sleep, you end up getting woken up by the sound of music, and you have to head out of the farm and into the forest. Rose tries to stop you here. It's kind of sad in a way because she's like just begging you to stay with her, but you end up running through it, and it gives you a lot of memories throughout the game and like all like the stuff that you have to go through, like the death and destruction. It's honestly a pretty cool sequence. It's by far one of my favorite sequences I've seen in a game. But once you get to the end of it, you end up finding the musical box again, and once you pick it up, you wake up. Once you wake up, for some reason, you're in the spire. I'm not sure how you ended up there, but everything is just like dead around you, and you head into the main boss room where Lucian is. And this is by far one of the most annoying parts of the game. It honestly pissed me off when I first played through it. Lucian is not even a boss. They can say he is whatever they want to, but this is not how you set up a boss fight at all. You walk in, you listen to his monologue. You can either do that or you can shoot him before it. If you shoot him before it, it ends the game. If you don't shoot him before it, he gets shot by Reaver. No matter what, he gets shot and there's no fucking boss. It is honestly stupid how this game ended, and I hated how abrupt it was. The ending of this game just felt like it was way too rushed. Throughout the whole story, it felt like it was at a good pacing, but then out of nowhere, everything just started kicking into like fast motion and just was like, okay, let's try to get through the story quicker, it seemed like. And I really hated that, but that's pretty much how the ending of this game really felt. So after you end up shooting him or letting Reaver shoot him, you get to make the final wish on the music box. There's 3 wishes. One is for gold. I don't know why you would choose that. Honestly, it's one of the more pointless ones. The second one makes a lot more sense, is the Spire. If you pick that one, it resurrects everyone that died during like the construction of the Spire. I honestly think that's a really cool ending to have in this game. And then the family ending. These are the only 2 endings I think are even thinkable of picking. The family ending brings back Rose, any of your family members that died, so that means like your children and your wife that Lucian ends up killing at the end, and you get your dog back. So it's really a no-brainer which one I'm gonna pick. I picked the one with the dog because, you know, I only care about the dog. I don't care if Rose comes back, honestly, in my personal opinion. Same with the wife and children. The only person that really mattered to me was my companion. So once you pick this ending, there is a couple interesting dialogue trees at the end. Hammer gets really pissed off because you picked that ending, but I don't really give a fuck. We went through this whole story. We deserve to have a happy ending. I don't care. She can cry about it for the rest of her life, which, you know, she's just all mad about it. Garth doesn't really care which ending you picked, and Reaver's just pissed off because he didn't end up getting to pick a wish, which makes sense, to be fair. Watching someone being able to, you know, choose what they want as their true ending to their life, I guess. But pretty much after you do that, Teresa ends up saying, congratulations, you pretty much did it. All the other people, like the heroes that ended up joining you, get to choose which location they get to go to at the end. That's pretty much their quote-unquote reward. So they all end up heading off their own locations. Before we even talk about what Teresa says here, I want to point out one other thing. I hated how the last 2 heroes were not fleshed out in any way, shape, or form. Hammer was like the only one that actually got a decent amount of dialogue. Garth got a little bit, and then Reaver was like maybe like an hour worth of gameplay before you stop seeing him again, which is really disappointing. But luckily you get to see him in the third game, so he gets fleshed out a lot more. But back to Teresa. Teresa just sends you back to Oakfield, but before she does, she pretty much just tells you she wants to keep the spire and sends you back. Sounds pretty ominous, but like literally nothing happens with it. So I don't even know why they try to make it like seem like, ooh, that's kind of like weird or anything. It literally does not lead to anything in the third game, so don't expect anything. But after that, that's pretty much how the game ends. There's a couple little side things you can go do if you buy the houses that all the other heroes owned, or if you buy Castle Fairfax. Like there's little like tidbit things that you can go play. Like you get to do like this dream sequence where you get to see Chesty, which is a kind of cool little side activity. Or you can go to Fairfax, which gives you like a reward where you get to pick which gender you want to be again. So that's kind of cool for like late game. If you ever want to switch your gender, you have that. But aside from those things, there's really nothing else to do. It just means you just kind of go collect money. You can just buy all the property if that's really what you want to do, or do whatever you really want at this point. You can go back to the arena and collect XP if that's really what you're up to, but that's really it. Overall, I really enjoyed the game. It's by far my favorite Fable game out of the three. I know it seems like I shit on it a lot at the end, and maybe even throughout the whole review, but I really do love it. But, you know, like with every game, I feel like there is some stuff that you can throw out and say, this could have been done better, but sadly, you know, we can only just say it now. It really all in the past now. We can't really fix it. But I really do love this game, and I definitely would recommend it. Check out if you've played the first game, because I feel like this one is a lot better than that one. Even though I really liked the first game, this one just has a lot more charm. I like the story better. I like the combat better. Aside from the will, I think that got done dirty in this game. But the economy is cool with like jobs and stuff. I really enjoyed that. I think the side quests are better. I just think almost everything overall was a lot better in my opinion. Fable 3 starts around the same way that Fable 2 does, where you get to decide which character you want to play, which is either a prince or a princess this time around. So you're not going to be starting from like the low end, you are going to be starting from like the high place, I guess you can put it that way. And it starts with another cinematic, and the cinematics in Fable are always beautiful. They just absolutely look great. I love the way that they do them each and every time. Once you get into this game, it's the same way as Fable 2. You get to see how Bowerstone and all that has evolved over the years, and I really enjoy that little idea. The only issue I have, honestly, with this game, like from the beginning of it, is I kind of just don't like the time period. I really didn't want an industrial type game. I was fine with like the guns and rifles and all that, like in Fable 2, but I feel like this was too much of an evolution over time that kind of made the game a little bit iffy, and I'll go into why that is later on. After this beautiful cinematic of watching a chicken get beat the hell up, you finally get to see your character and get to make your first ever decision in the game. It's nothing important, it's just what clothes you want to pick. You get woken up by your butler, which is named Jasper, and he just pretty much tells you to choose one of the or the other. And after you choose it, it really doesn't do anything. It's just to show you that this game is going to have some type of decisions, just like the first and second game. After you choose them, you end up going outside and you go to meet with your girlfriend or whatever you want it to be, or boyfriend, whatever. And when you actually get up to them, you get to finally see the new interaction menu. The new interaction menu is honestly not that bad. I think it's kind of cool. Like, it's cool to have like face-to-face interactions, but there is some major issues with it, and I'll go into that now. The new interaction menu is honestly pretty cool. I like the idea that all the new interactions are a lot more personable, like when you do a hug, it actually hugs the person, kiss, or punch, whatever you want it to be. But the only issue with it, honestly, is that it is only one type of interactions. It makes it very tedious later on if you're trying to build up multiple relationships at once, just because it is mano and mano. You have to just only be talking to that person to build the relationship, which really sucks, because when you're trying to get like groups of people to like you, you have to go to each and every person separately. While in Fable 2, I think it did it a lot better. where you just use a scroll wheel and you pick whatever interaction you want to do, and once you pick it, you just do it. And after that, it's all done. Like, everyone around in that area will either like it or hate it depending on what you're trying to do, which is what I like. I feel like it was a cool innovation to add the idea that you can now decide if you want to do it like face to face. I think it should have been two different ways where you get to decide if you want to do it like that or do it one on one. But I guess they decided that the one on one thing was better, but there's also another issue with it, and that is building friendships. Friendships and relationships are fine and dandy, but there's a lot of major issues with it, and I'll be going into that later just because it plays into the leveling system of this game, which is by far the most god-awful thing I want to talk about. But let's get back onto the plot. After you meet up with this girl, either you hug or kiss them, and then you pretty much head throughout the castle to see different interactions that played no major role into the story, but you just get to decide them. It pretty much is the way of shaping your character on morality-wise. Like, you go to the kitchen, you can either be very stubborn or give them a passionate speech, and after you do that, there's a whole bunch of other things you get to do. But this is where you meet one of the more of the main characters in the game. And this is where you end up meeting Walter. Walter is by far one of the best characters throughout all of the games, and same with most of the cast in this game. Honestly, Fable 3 has one of the best casts that you'll ever see throughout the series. A lot of people will say Jack of Blades is amazing, and I do agree. Jack of Blades is one of the best characters in the game, and same with a lot of the characters in Fable 2, but they just do not light a candle to what happened in Fable 3, at least in my opinion. There's a lot of characters in this game that, like, I feel like if they weren't here, this game would have been even worse than where it was. These characters are actually interesting, they have great dialogue, they're at least somewhat witty, stuff like that. And I'm really happy that they were able to add stuff like this, and it made the game a lot more interesting. It made me want to play through it even more. When I first ever played through it, I played this game hundreds of times by now, but it just had an amazing cast on the side. But after you end up meeting Walter, you end up heading towards the training room. As you head off to the training room, there ends up being a protest outside, and you either get to side or don't side with the protest. It really doesn't matter. Like I said, this is just a morality decision. It doesn't change anything throughout the game if you decide to or do not. It pretty much is a protest against your brother Logan, which is the king of Albion right now. And he is just pretty much a big piece of shit, so they're just trying to get him to pretty much represent their people, but he just does not want to, which does play a role a little bit later in this. After you head to the training room, you get to do some combat with Walter, and it's pretty much the same basic stuff. Don't expect anything different from Fable 1 and 2, so I'm not going to go all too into it. It's literally just the same type of combat. I will go into the new abilities and stuff that they add, but aside from that, it's pretty much the same thing. But after you guys are done training, Walter ends up getting called into a meeting with Logan. And this is where you go with your girlfriend and you guys need to go watch the meeting. And pretty much in the meeting, he talks about that he just wants to kill every protester that ended up showing up because, you know, bad guy bad, so we have to do bad guy stuff. So he ends up saying he's going to kill everyone at the meeting. At the protest, and Walter is against it, and then they beat up Walter, and then you break in and you stop the meeting pretty much. And this is where one of the actual major decisions come into play. This one actually does do something to the game. So pretty much you have to decide, because Logan said if you want to be treated like an adult, you have to make adult decisions. So you have to decide if your girlfriend gets executed or all the protesters that went. I chose the girlfriend to be the one that gets to live, so all the protesters ended up dying. Elf on them, I guess. I don't really know. I don't really care. It doesn't have a morality, this one, so it's really up to you what you want to decide. There's no evil decision here. I feel like it would have been kind of funny to let the person decide neither survive. That would be somewhat of an interesting outcome, but no, they didn't have that. So either one dies or the other group dies. It's really up to you. But after you do this, your character is pretty peeved after, you know, pretty much sentencing to a whole bunch of people to their death. So you head back to your room and go to sleep, which you are woken up that night by Jasper and Walter, and you guys head to your parents' cemetery. And once you head in, it depends on what type of hero you played in the first game. I played a male hero for the second game, so you end up getting the seal from your father, which leads you to a secret passage that goes underground. Once you grab this is when your first ever magic comes into play, which is the fireball, which is the basic attack from each and every game that is usually the first one that you get each and every time. After you get the fireball attack, you end up heading through the passage and you just kill a whole bunch of bats with the fire to pretty much show you how to use it. It's pretty basic stuff, just like I said, it's just like the original game, so I'm not going to go all too much into it. You literally just kill a whole bunch of bats with it, and then you head on. After you head on, you end up getting to the end of it, and you hit this button, and it brings you to a new special place, which is another thing I absolutely hate, the hub. When you hit the hub, it is one of the worst places I've ever seen, and is by far one of the biggest annoyances of the game. When you get into the hub, there is the pause menu that you get to go into, and pretty much a weapon rack. It's kind of cool to see like where you can go into this one special room where you get to choose which weapon you want to use, magic, stuff like that. They also have a new appearance room and all that you get to go into. It's somewhat cool. Don't get me wrong, the idea is interesting, but the way they put it in is absolutely terrible. The only other two rooms they have is a social room where you get to go buy stuff with Xbox points, which is a whole bunch of cringe crap where it's just cosmetics in the game. By far one of the most annoying things, and it's pretty gross. I hate that type of stuff in any type of game. Mostly when it's a single player game, it makes it even worse. This game had a lot of cosmetics and stuff to buy for like animals and stuff. Never spend your money on that type of stuff. It's just not worth your time, mostly even now. But the only other room is a treasury where you get to check out all your gold, which is kind of cool. It fluctuates, and if you get to the top, there's like a special key you can grab, and then when you spend it all, there is a weapon that you can get at the end of it, which is kind of cool. I like it. I like the idea around that type of stuff. It makes it a little bit more interesting and fun to play through, but here's the negatives. The hub, anytime you go into that, is a huge loading screen fest. So when you pause, instead of it bringing you to a pause menu, it brings you to the hub. So no matter what, you have to wait for a load time to load into this area to walk around. And then you have to go to the settings on the side, and that's how you quit instead. So it's pretty annoying how they have it set up like that. So anytime you want to pause, it brings you there. You walk around to get whatever you need, and then you unpause to get back into the game. It can sound convenient, but it's not. Because every time you pause, you have to go to a different room. Like, let's say you want a weapon, you pause, so you have to load, and then you have to load again to get whatever weapon you want to use. And let's say you need to go to the treasury after. There's another loading screen. Oh, and then maybe you want to check out stuff that's in the store. There's another loading screen. Oh, maybe I want to change my outfit as well. Boom, there's another loading screen. And then let's get back into the game. Boom, there's another loading screen. There's so much loading at this part. It is absolutely annoying. I don't know who thought this was a good idea, but I hope they never work on game design ever again, because it is the most god-awful thing. It would have been different if this came out on like the Xbox One or something like that, because the loading screens wouldn't have been all too unbearable. Like, don't get me wrong, when I'm playing on the Xbox One, these are like seamless loads. But on like Xbox 360, you're sitting there for like 5 to 10 seconds each and every load time just to get into the next room, depending on how fast your Xbox is working. And I'm guessing people around this time do not have systems that work at like, top speed anymore. So it is just a huge annoyance, and it brings into the next thing, which is pretty much the leveling system, which we'll talk about after we meet the next character, Sabine. So after you do the loading screen fest, you end up getting to the map that's also in the hub, which is another load screen. Once you press into it, you can press on wherever you want to go on the map, which is pretty cool. I love the look of the map. It's absolutely beautiful, and it plays into key details of the game that are actually pretty fun, which I will go into as well later. But you just choose where you have to go, which is the mountains. You're going to make your first allies for the revolution against your brother Logan. And when you head there, you get to meet the character Sabine. Sabine is a pretty chill dude. He seems like a hard ass, but he's not all too bad of a person once you actually get to meet him. And pretty much all he tells you is that if the only way he'll help you is if you support him first, and this is what you're going to find out throughout the game. This is pretty much the way to get any allies for the revolution, is you have to do stuff for them to join you. And Sabine has some basic tasks for you to do. Sabine is another amazing character, same with his protector, Boulder. They are absolutely great characters. Like I said, this game has one of the best casts I have seen throughout the series. After you talk about Sabine and you get the quest, this leads into by far the worst part of the game, and that's the path to rule. There's only one positive, honestly, of this area, and that is that you get to see Teresa again. And this is also added on to the hub, so here's another loading screen on top of that. You're welcome. So once you get into this place, it is pretty much a leveling place where you go and use your guild seals, which are new leveling up system. Instead of orbs that you collect, instead you collect seals, which you can upgrade anything you want instead of it being set particular stuff with the particles and stuff that you got in the prior games, which is okay. I mean, I kind of liked how they did it with the orbs and stuff from the prior games, but if they wanted to try something else out, that is completely fine with me. But once you get into it, you'll notice that this place absolutely fucking sucks. I mean, it is by far the worst spot in the game. Once you get into it, you get to decide what you want to level up. You can either level up your melee, magic, you can even get appearances and stuff like that. And this is where the issue comes in. Any interaction, like if you want a friendship or relationship in this game, you have to wait. You have to wait until you're far enough into the game to do that. It's the same thing with jobs. You cannot work, or you cannot have a lot more money from working jobs unless you level it up. It's the same thing with damage and everything else. It's the same thing with expressions, different dye colors for your outfits, stuff like that. You cannot use them unless you level up. And this would be fine as a system where, oh, okay, I gotta level up. But then they have it against a wall where you cannot level up certain things unless you've progressed the story enough. So in the prior games, you could deck yourself out and be very OP by the end of the game, or even at midway through the game, you could be stronger than everyone around you. And I like that because it lets you decide. It is an RPG after all. You get to decide if you want to be very OP or be on par with the enemies around you, or even weaker than the enemies around you, which I really like throughout the prior games. But in this game, it is a forced upon you thing where you're going to, no matter what, be on par with the enemies or weaker than them. You don't get to decide that in this game. It's the same thing with everything else as well. If you want to have a relationship, like I said, you have to wait until you get far enough into the game. If you want to buy businesses as well, which is one of my favorite things to do throughout the games, you cannot do that unless you progress throughout the game. Why? Why is all this behind a wall? This makes no sense, and I'm not sure what the decision making was around this. I get that they wanted the game to feel like it was fair and probably to make the game last a little bit longer because the game is very short. So I'm guessing maybe that was a way around it, is by putting this type of bullshit throughout it so that you cannot progress the game, so you don't beat it immediately. But the way they did it was by far the worst decision in the game. I don't like the idea that I am not going to be able to be stronger than these enemies just because. And it's the same thing with working a job. I loved how they did it in the prior game, where if you work the job, you level up and then you make more money. You just had to work the job to get those levels. But now it's not even about that. It's literally just, oh, did you level up? Oh, okay, now you get more money. You leveled up on your character. Nice job. Oh, but you want to make more than that? Oh, well, you got to wait until you're on Act 3. It makes no sense, but that's how they decided to do it with every single leveling in this game, and I absolutely fucking hate it. It is one of the most frustrating things to deal with, but aside from that, there is some other key details, we're going to be getting into that later, that are almost on the same level of annoyance. But let's get back onto the main story. So pretty much what we have to do is go off into a couple different directions for Sabine to join our rebellion. The first thing we need to do is get the artifact and then bring it back to him. This will be the music box that you find in the prior game that Teresa uses to pretty much give you the wishes, which is a cool little hit to like back history and all that. I think it's kind of cool to see like stuff from the other games. It's kind of like a little bit nostalgic to see it. But after you get there, you finally get to see some new and interesting things about the weapons. The weapons in this game are pretty generic, just like in the prior games, but there's a unique twist to them. So this time around, they decided to add these like little like quests and challenges that you can do for your weapon to level them up. I think it's kind of a cool idea, but the issue is some of these challenges are just absolutely terrible. Like, it's stuff that you're probably not going to be able to do in your playthrough, or it's going to take a long while to get it done. Like, some of them are like, make 30 best friends in the game. Now, this sounds pretty easy, but this is where it kind of gets annoying. So you have to go and talk to a person for maybe like 2 to 3 minutes, get the relationship all the way up, and then they give you a quest to go do, and that can take another 2 to 3 minutes to do, and then you have to go all the way back to them, so that's another like minute on top of that, and then you give them the present or whatever may be that they are looking for. So it is pretty tedious and repetitive for certain things. Other things are like do critical hits and stuff like that. At least those ones are at least based around the weapon. I wish that the challenges that you had were a little bit more based on what you're actually using instead of what's something random we can throw in. Oh, they need 300,000 gold to use this weapon upgraded. Like, it's stuff like that that's just really random that they just throw in just to make it take a little bit longer. If not, it's just pretty much really annoying to throw it in like that. But it does make the weapons at least look cool. And if you don't end up liking the look of the weapon, you can pretty much restart from a checkpoint and then redo it, and then it gives you a different weapon. The game was basing it around the idea that it was going to be unique and made for your character each and every time, but it's not really unique. It's literally just randomly generated, so that whole thing was kind of a lie, but it's kind of whatever. At least it looks cool, and it makes the fighting and combat a little bit more enticing to make you keep playing even after you beat the game. So that at least there's one positive to it. But after you return the music box to Sabine, you end up having to go to Rebel Camp, and you have to take out these bandits that are pretty much stopping the supply chain that is going to Sabine's land. So pretty much what you have to do is just run through, kill a whole bunch of bandits, and this is where another interesting thing comes into the game that either you're going to think it's interesting or it's not. The only reason why I don't think it's interesting is for this key detail. So at the end of the fight that you end up having with the bandit boss, there is a decision either to let him live or kill him. So this is not only a morality thing, but also something else that was supposed to be pretty unique and I thought was interesting the first time I played through, but it ends up being very disappointing later on. So the idea is if you leave him alive, he can quote unquote join your army with his bandits for the revolution by the end of the game. Now, all this sounds cool and fine and dandy. I actually thought this was an amazing idea, but let me tell you here, none of that stuff happens in the game. None of it actually matters. Spoiler, it literally doesn't do anything. I don't understand why they set it up this way. It sounded interesting. It was like, oh, okay, so if I keep him alive, he'll actually join me in the revolution at the end. You don't see him. You don't see any of his troops. You don't see any of that. So it's kind of just really doesn't matter if you let him live or die. It really just comes down to morality. So don't expect this guy to show up and help you in the revolution later on. It's the same thing with every other side quest that you'll see. It's interesting that they have this system set in place where every time you do a side quest, they quote unquote join your army. It sounds interesting enough, but when you actually get to it, only the key ones actually show up. So that would be Sabine and a couple of the other major hitters, which I will be going on into later, which is really disappointing. So it just feels like what a waste of potential that was there, and why even set it up this way if it actually was not going to make any difference later on in the game. At least in my opinion, I think it was just a waste of time if it's not going to actually do anything to progress the story or add any type of interest to it later on. But at least there's some positives around this area. One thing that's actually pretty interesting, when you're getting the music box, you meet a character named Samuel, and he runs the library in Brightwall. And Brightwall is pretty much supposed to be the place that ends up sending supplies to help Sabine's people. And there's something interesting at this point in time that I actually really enjoy and hope to see in the next game. And this is the promise system. So pretty much what happens after you do a decent amount of side quests, you end up pretty much showing that you are reliable and that you are willing to help the people. And pretty much at this point in time, they ask you for favors, and this is what you call a promise. So pretty much after the rebellion, these promises come into play, and it's pretty much whatever they want. So with Brightwall, it will be they want the library restored and some other things. And Sabine wants like a safer pass and stuff for his people so they are able to leave the mountains and stuff. I honestly think the system is pretty cool, and I really enjoyed that they added something that at least added some type of character to the game. If only it was a little bit more fleshed out, and you'll see what I mean later. Sadly, these systems are really cool, but the game is stupid short, so it can't really get to the full potential of it. But after you sign the promise with Samuel and you end up signing the promise with Sabine, you can head off into the next area. Before we get there, I want to say one thing I think that is also a positive about these games is the side missions. They are absolutely amazing and just fun and goofy little things on the side that you can either do or don't. Well, by do or don't, I mean you have to do them no matter what, because the game kind of forces you to do so, which is iffy for certain people. If you're trying to go through a fast experience, this game is not going to allow you. You need to follow side quests to get further progression through the game, which I am personally fine with because they're quick and easy. So you'll do like random stuff like kicking chickens, like in the originals, like you get the chicken chaser title and stuff for doing so. And, you know, like killing bandits or going into caves to save people's kids, stuff like that. It's like basic little things. The only other things that you really find in Brightwall that are somewhat of interest are like collectibles. Like you have to collect these books for Samuel for the Academy. It's okay. They're not really all too interesting of side quests, but it's something on the side to do. It's the same thing with like these gnomes that you can shoot. You'll end up meeting a guy that has a whole bunch of gnomes. It isn't as interesting as Fable 2 with the gargoyles, but at least they have something on the side for you to do. And they also have like another one that you'll get way later on in the game, and it's like flowers. It's all just like kind of whatever stuff. At least the flower ones add lore to the game, which is kind of cool. Like, I guess the books do a little bit, but the gnomes are pretty much just kind of annoying. So if you really like doing collectibles, at least there's a lot there for you. I think it's a little too excessive in this one compared to the original when they only had like 50 of them, but now they're just like, here's like 90 different things to collect. It's not as exciting that way, at least in my opinion. But after you're done helping Sabine and Samuel, you end up heading to Railcart, and pretty much it is supposed to lead you to the city. And I think it's kind of cool how like the industrial vibe is set up. Sadly, I'm just not all too interested in it because I love the medieval vibe that Fable 1 and 2 gave. I feel like this game did progress a little too far, at least for me. But at least there's some interesting stuff that happens. When you get into the cave to go on the rail cart with Walter, it ends up getting attacked by, you wouldn't guess, the Hobbs. So these are something that was in the prior game, which I always thought they were awesome. It's one of my favorite enemies, at least in the games. You end up finding them after you have to head down farther into the cave because the rail carts got destroyed. So you have to somehow still get to the city. So you head down there, you kill a whole bunch of Hobbs, and at least there's some humor at this part, like this part with Walter.
I don't think you're going to find a way round this time. But I've got some magic of my own. Watch and learn. Boom!
And And aside from that, it just gives you the vibe that at least the combat is still really fun, at least in my opinion. Same with like the magic and stuff. Even though all of them are a little bit dumbed down, but at least there's some positives with the magic, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. And that is that you get to mix two different magics, like spells, together, and it's really cool. Like you can find a whole bunch of different variants that actually do something, and it's really interesting. The only thing I don't like about it, honestly, is that you have to wear gloves now. It's such a small detail, but I hate the idea that you have to wear gloves to do the magic now in this game, when in the original, technically, it's all being done by you. But it's still really cool to see, and I love like mixing like hail with tornado or fire with tornado. It's just like really cool stuff that is just on the side that at least made the spells a lot more interesting than they were in Fable 2. I think Fable 2 did it the most iffy, but Fable 1, you can really never top it unless you had all the same spells and more on top of that. Because Fable 1 did so much with the magic that was actually interesting. But after you fight a decent amount of hobs, you can end up heading out into a new area, and this is where you meet your next ally in the rebellion. So after fighting a whole bunch of hobs and getting out of the cave, you end up in Morningwood, which is a haha funny name. Pretty much when you get to this place, you end up heading to a fort where there is a whole bunch of quote-unquote exiled type of troops that are there. At least that's what the feeling is, because they're pretty much sent there to pretty much die, because there's just an undead force that keeps coming back every single night that attacks the fort. So it pretty much is just exile for people that Logan does not want in the city anymore. And this is where you meet Major Swift and Ben Finn. Major Swift and Ben Finn are also really good characters. Like I said, at least one positive about this game, honestly, is just the cast is just really fun and really enjoyable to like meet and deal with. And this is around the halfway point of the game, which is really telling on how short the game is, honestly. You're almost to the rebellion point, which is kind of insane. But pretty much what you do here is you defend the fort, and then you sign a promise that doesn't even really come to fruition later on, which is interesting. It's one of the only, actually is the only promise that really doesn't lead to anything, really. But it is a really fun part, just like fighting through the undead. It also unlocks a side mission where you get to meet the two brothers that you've seen in Fable 2 that's brought back the undead and stuff. It's a cool callback to prior games, and I really like that. At least they had something interesting to throw in. And it's not even just one side quest with them, you get to do a couple. And like I said, that is another positive about the game, is honestly the side quests are really fun, but the game is just too short. But after you fight through the Morningwood, you end up in Bowerstone, and you are in the industrial district. So you get to kind of see how the industry has taken over the city. And it looks pretty cool. I just think the coloring and stuff are a little bit dead in the game, so it kind of looks just like grim. And I get that's the idea around it, is to show that the city is pretty much ruled in pretty much terrible state by Logan's regime. And there's also another person that runs it that we'll go into in a couple seconds. After you go through a decent amount of the industrial district, you end up finding someone talking about starting a rebellion. He was like, we shouldn't be treated like this. They have children working inside factories and stuff like that. Awesome move, by the way. So you're just pretty much going around, and then after you hear him talking about the rebellion, he ends up getting shot by a man named Reaver.
Thing for it. We have to stand up to Reaver.
But lying down is so much easier than standing up. My dear friends, in order to raise morale, I am offering prizes to the most deserving workers. The rules that will govern what I like to call the Reaver Team Spirit Award are these. Firstly, any worker that so much as murmurs another complaint will be cut. Secondly, any worker who takes more than a 3-second break will be shot. Thirdly, any worker who breaks any other rules I have yet to formulate will, yes, you guessed it, be shot. They return to work now. As you know, I'm a generous man and likely to start handing out prizes right away. So go on, shoo, be off with you. Chop, chop.
That's why we're here. That's why Albion needs you.
Reaver is from Fable 2, and it's awesome to see him back. Reaver is one of my favorite characters that ended up showing up way too late into the story, so they really didn't flesh him out in the second one. It was cool to see him. He was a really interesting character, but he was only around for like 20 minutes of the game, and then the game ends. So it was kind of disappointing in that light, so I'm happy they brought him here and they fleshed him out a little bit more. And it makes sense that he is here. Like, out of any character that they could have brought back, he's the only one that actually makes sense, just because of his contract he made with those demons in the second game, where he steals the use from others and puts it back into himself. So it's awesome to see him back again, and of course he's going to be an antagonist. But at least there is a little bit interesting to it. So after you end up seeing him get shot, you end up going into the sewers where you meet the next person that is going to join your rebellion. But this is where you end up meeting another character named Paige. She is iffy, she's an alright character. Her and Ben have a quote-unquote love interest, at least Ben's interested in her. She gets introduced way too late into the game for me to be all too interested in, honestly. There is one other character that gets introduced even later, and I could never get any interest. I barely even remember the name of them just because of how boring they were. Like, just because you don't have enough time to actually get introduced to the character. But pretty much the way to get Paige to join your team is the same way as every other character. You have to do a side quest for her. So you go around doing a whole bunch of side quests, and this is where one of the best side quests in the game at least come into play. And by best in the game, I mean it's the best out of all the Fable games, at least in my opinion. You meet these three dudes, they're playing like a D&D style game, and they shrink you down and throw you into the game, and you play through a whole story. It's really interesting, the plot is fun, and everything is very unique. I really enjoyed this part, and I wish they would have played more into this with the rest of the side missions. Don't get me wrong, there's like some other interesting ones, like where you're doing a storybook type thing where a whole bunch of ghosts are telling a play and you have to follow what the play parts are. That one's pretty fun as well. But aside from those, there's nothing all too interesting that's like this. At least in my opinion, this one at least was really unique, and every time I play through the game, I'm happy to get back to that part. But after you do a couple more side quests, you head back to Paige, and she has one more quest for you to do, and that is follow her to Reaver's house. It's pretty much where they're going to be having a party, and she wants to pretty much kill off Reaver. So you put on a costume and you sneak in with her, and you end up finding out this place is a trap, and it pretty much introduces the arena style that they've had in every single Fable game. By the way, every Fable game has to have some type of arena, even this one. This one by far is the most uninspired out of the three. I think it just spins a wheel, it picks an enemy that you fight, you go into the room, you kill it, and then you leave. Over and over again, you do that for maybe 10 to 20 minutes worth of gameplay time. And this is where you notice that, yeah, if you didn't level up, it's going to be a major pain in the ass, because the enemies are actually pretty hard, and they introduce enemies that I think are kind of bizarre to introduce so early on because they haven't even come into the plot yet. But whatever they want to do, they can have fun with whatever they want to set it up as. It's their game after all, but it was really weird to see like the desert type of enemies, mostly when they were never even introduced into the game yet. But they also show off some enemies that are from prior games, which were the Balverines. It was cool to see them at least, and they at least play some type of a role inside the plot, so it was fun to see them. But pretty much what ends up happening after you fight through, Reaver ends up escaping and he kills everyone else by turning them into Balverines that end up attacking you. After you free her friend, you end up just getting the promise that you have to sign for her, which I think is kind of bullshit. After all that help that you gave her, she still expects you to give her even more. Out of any characters, I think it was the most unfair out of all of them because you help her the most. But she ends up having another promise where you'll have to set up the industrial industry in a better way than it is now, which is interesting, and I like how they play a morality on those types of things. But this is where you end up hearing about pretty much everyone has to head to the castle. There's going to be like an important announcement. So everyone heads off to the castle to see Major Swift getting executed. This part was somewhat interesting, but it leads into a really fast-paced motion of the story just like wrapping up really fast. So pretty much what ends up happening after Major Swift dies, you head back to the sewer area, and then you guys are pretty much escaping to a boat to find Aurora, which is another location that is magically thrown into the game way late into the game. And I mean way late. So you head to Aurora, or you have to head there. You have to fight through a whole bunch of enemies first. After you do so, you, Walter, and Ben head off to this location. Your ship ends up getting destroyed by a whole bunch of boats following. They end up shooting cannons at you, and the ship ends up sinking. But somehow you magically still end up in Aurora. I don't really understand that part, but whatever. It's part of the plot. Why not? But you end up crash landing there. You end up finding Walter and your dog, and you head through. And this is where some of the interesting stuff with the plot at least comes into play, but I think it was way too late into the game. So this is where you end up meeting Walter again. You both crash around the same area, and Ben is just nowhere to be found. You end up heading out and find this like ruins area, and it leads into like a cave. So Walter ends up picking up a book, and he reads a couple of the pages, and it ends up opening this like shield that was covering the cave, and they head down into it, which ends up leading to a lot of disaster later on. So when you head into the cave, you end up seeing that there's like this weird darkness that's going on that's like causing shadows to spawn and stuff that are aggressive towards you. It's kind of like a horror vibe, and it honestly did it really well. I thought it was really cool when I first ever saw this, and it leads you to the major enemy of the game, which isn't even your brother anymore. It's the guy named Crawler. It's a lot more interesting than I thought it was going to be. I think the only issue with this character though is it was introduced way too late into the plot for it to be as like substantial or important for me. At least in my opinion, if it was introduced maybe hours before that, or it had some type of hints to it, but they had no hinting at it. It was just immediate, like, here's this enemy, and he's going to be the aggressor throughout the rest of the game. He ends up wounding Walter really bad around this area. You actually think he dies at first, but you end up making it out of the cave with him after fighting a whole bunch of the shadow demons. I think they're somewhat interesting, but they're hella weak. They actually did imply them in Fable 2. I remember fighting some type of enemies like this, so it was cool to at least see some enemy come back and have a lot more of a plot to it and like interest to it, if that makes any sense. So it was at least cool in that light. But after you guys head out of the cave, Walter's way too weak and he can't see anymore. He's completely blind, so you have to carry him. He ends up telling you to leave him, but you get to decide if you want to or not. No matter what, you're going to leave him. It ends up dropping him, but it's a morality thing for you again. Like, it really doesn't matter what you decide here. But you end up heading into the desert after, and the darkness just keeps attacking you over and over again, showing you death of everyone, like all your cities ruined and all that. It's actually really cool. I actually really enjoy how this is set up. And then your character ends up passing out, and you end up in the city of Aurora. When you wake up, you end up meeting the character Kaylin, and this is the person that runs Aurora, and she gives you pretty much the rundown of the whole like city. It was pretty interesting, but I think they just didn't play into it enough for it to be like very exciting. Like when you wake up, she ends up telling you about the darkness and how it's been plaguing her lands for a long time, and Logan has actually been there prior to you being there, and he promised to come and help them, and he just never came back to help them. And you find out why Logan is technically the big bad guy, and he doesn't really show, he's just very fierce and all that. And you kind of get the reason why now at this point in time, because he's pretty much trying to protect the city as much as possible, while he's going to be willing to sacrifice the rest of the people. He's pretty much making the decision that only certain people will survive at the end of the day, so we are going to decide which ones are actually going to make it through, which I think is a admirable idea. Like, he is technically still a good guy. It's just the situation he was dealt was way too bad to the point where he didn't know how to deal with it himself. So you pretty much get sent around the city to walk around and find out more about like the darkness and stuff in Aurora. It literally takes, I mean, like a minute of just walking around, and that's it. And then she's just like, now you understand why we're in this situation. It's like, no, not really. It really didn't add enough to make it interesting. But right after that, she ends up asking you to make the promise so that she'll join the rebellion with you that your brother decided not to follow through with, which I think is fair enough to give her the promise. The only thing I always thought was bizarre is you cannot decline the promises, but you'll see why later, so at least it makes sense why you couldn't. So you end up signing the promise, and then boom, immediately into the rebellion. You're at the castle fighting a whole bunch of enemies that are under Logan's reign, and it's like immediate, like you're one spot here, and then boom, you're into the next spot where you're fighting enemies. It's very abrupt, and it shows you how like quickly the game was rushed, because when you get to this area after you kill all the enemies, and then boom, you take over the castle. It is insanely fast. It's an interesting part. I honestly think the rebellion of the castle was really fun to fight through, but it was really, really fast. And you can tell that they didn't have the time. They were definitely on a time crunch with this spot. But this is where I was talking about before, like with like the bandit and all the other side missions. You quote unquote get these people as allies. You don't see them anywhere at this point in time. They don't show up at all. And it's just like, well, so you're telling me that you placed this in place and then it just doesn't do anything towards the plot? Okay, thanks a lot. So you don't see any of the bandits. You do see Sabine's troops, you see Paige's troops, and you see the Auroran troops. That's the only ones you see. Aside from them, you do see Major Swift's troops, even though he died. Ben took his place, so his troops followed him instead. And aside from that, you don't see any of the other people that you helped. It would have been cool if you helped all of them and then there was like some crazy cutscene with them, but no, nothing. You don't see them ever again. They have no major plot to it. So helping them or not helping them really does not have any type of impact, which is very disappointing, at least in my opinion. But after you run through that, you end up heading to the castle, and this is where you end up making Logan step down. And this is when you become king. I mean, it's abrupt. You become king immediately. So after you take over king, you end up getting a new butler. It's not just Jasper anymore. You have this other dude. And he pretty much tells you the state of the castle and how broke you guys are. You guys have, I think, 500,000 sitting in the chambers, which is not that much when you think about it. Like, it looks like a lot at this point in time. It's like, oh, that's crazy. That's actually a lot of money. But you'll find out 2 seconds later, that's actually not that much because of how expensive the end game is. And I mean expensive. So around this time, you end up starting to become like the king. So you have to make decisions for the city and the well-being of your people. It's really interesting, and I really like this part of the game. But like I said, the game is stupid short. This part is maybe an hour, maybe an hour and a half if you really are pushing it for like length time. So pretty much all you have to do is make a whole bunch of decisions. Like you have to decide if the promises that you made were worthwhile and worth actually keeping, or just if you want to disregard them. It really comes down to what your morality was trying to be. If you really want to keep your morality high, you have to follow through with every promise, which I will go into a second. But the last thing that you actually get to do is decide if your brother gets to live or not. And if you do so, it doesn't do anything. If you don't, it doesn't do anything. It really doesn't matter. Like I said, like these things are interesting and it's fun for the plot, but it doesn't play anything into the role. So it's just like, what is the point of making these decisions if they don't do anything? Yeah, sure, I get a halo above my head or devil horns instead if I decide one or the other, but it's not as impactful as Fable 2 was. Like, if you decided to help the church in Fable 2, it would end up evolving into something big and beautiful. But if you decided not to help it, it would all go into ruins. That's interesting. It's the same thing with the fortress that you end up finding in Fable 2. If you help them, it ends up growing in power, but if you decide not to, you end up destroying the whole thing. It adds to the intrigue of the game. But sadly, with Fable 3, it seemed to want to do that, but it just wasn't there yet. Like, I guess with following the promises, like you end up meeting with Sabine, Paige, and the rest of the people to decide the fates of their people in the cities. You do get to see the upgrades, at least in that part, but there is other key things I wish they would have built into, but they just never did. So pretty much at this point, you get to decide if you want to help or not. The issue with being a helper is you are not going to have enough money. You need to work. And I mean by work, I mean you have to sit there for at least 2 to 3 hours at a job in the game. Unless you've been buying buildings and collecting money from your industry, you are screwed at this part. There is so much money that you have to end up spending on the city. I think it's like 6 to 7 million, and you still have to have like 5 million sitting in the bank account to make sure everyone survives. It's absolutely insane. It's a lot of money, and it's a lot of time to be spending to do so. And they don't set you up for this at all. And mind you, you want to do this before you do any of the promises, like go collect this money, because if you end up doing all the promises, end up at the court around like the day 50, it automatically goes into endgame. There's no telling of that happening. It's just immediate. So you have like 50 days left. You're like, okay, so we're going to be ready within these next 50 days for the attack. But no, boom, right into the end game. It's insane. It doesn't give you any type of talk before. It's like, you need to be ready for this because we're going into end game right now. No, they don't do that. They immediately throw you into it. They do give you a couple side things to collect money, like you end up going to Aurora and finding a diamond. It doesn't add all too much money because immediately after, someone asks for all of the money you just got from that mission for the next promise. It's insane. And then there's another one where you help some rich lady. All that money you just got is immediately gone. You get it from a Balverine mission with her, which is at least somewhat interesting. But it just shows that they really didn't set this up right. They pretty much expected you to be buying businesses. At least personally, I was a huge industry freak in Fable 2 and 3, so it was easy for me. But people that weren't building up for that and were just playing through the plot are going to get a rude awakening by the end of the game, which really sucks because this does actually have consequences if you do not give them money. Or if you don't have enough to save the people, it has major consequences, and I'll tell you why. So pretty much after you do all the promises, you decide if you want to or not. I decided to do all of them, so I get a halo above my head. I was a good boy. But if you decided not to, you get your devil horns. And then you fight the darkness, which ends up being the main antagonist at the end. This part, maybe it's like 10 to 15 minutes of you just fighting through shadow enemies, and it's showing you like death and like what would happen and what is going to happen to your people. It's somewhat interesting, but it's not that great. Honestly, this part is pretty iffy. The darkness was at least introduced to be really cool, but the last mission for it was not all too interesting. But you end up seeing the crawler. He ends up crawling inside of Walter's mouth, which is awesome. It's really cool to see. And you pretty much have to fight Walter and kill him to pretty much end the game. Sadly, no matter what, Walter is going to die at this point. And I think that is another misstep by the people that made the game. If you decided to follow through and do all the missions and get the halo above your head and stuff, and you were able to save everyone, you should have been able to save him. I think that's how they should have changed it, because it's not like they were going to make a sequel to this. So I don't understand why it had to follow through with that type of plot. And plus, being good or evil has no weight on this part, because you don't get to decide if he dies or not. You kill him no matter what, which is stupid. But aside from that, after you do that, if you decided to follow through with the promises, this decides if people are going to show up to his grave when he dies or if they're not. I decided to follow through with the promises, so everyone shows up to his graveyard, and if you didn't, everyone's just gone. You end up talking to Teresa one more time, and that pretty much wraps up the game. Now, what I wanted to get into is right here. If you decided not to have any money by the end of the game, I am not even joking you, the whole map is going to be empty. There's not going to be a single person in sight. And it's so stupid. Like legit, the whole castle's empty, Aurora's empty, everywhere. I get the idea is because it had a major consequence. It's like, hey, If you don't spend your money and get all that money to save up, there is not going to be a single person alive. And they weren't even joking. It was completely empty around the castle. But this not only ruins one thing, but it ruins another, and that is that missions, like side quests that are all left around the map, are completely empty. I guess there is a way to make them respawn. I guess if you wait a long while, they'll end up respawning later on, but every single person is going to hate you because you pretty much let the city down and everyone ended up dying. I think it's just stupid, and it just wasted so much time. I think if you had enough money to pay off all the debts and stuff for the promises, that should have been enough, but they also wanted you to have extra money sitting on top of that, which is absolutely insane in my opinion. But it really comes up to you what ending you were trying to get. If you're trying to be evil, then this is an easy spot. It doesn't really matter what you do, unless you just take all the money out of the vault that you end up getting, then everyone is going to survive. But if you're trying to play for a good ending, you're gonna have to spend a lot of money. But there's no reason for the good ending, honestly, aside from the people still being there and your wife still being around, because Walter still ends up dying no matter what, which I think is really disappointing. But overall, was Fable 3 really the worst in the series? There is still some key games that were worse, like the Connect game and Fable, I think it's Legends, the little puppet ones that are 10 times worse. But for the mainline games like that are Fable 1, 2, and 3, 3 is by far the worst. I think the game had a lot of potential. I think it was just way too rushed. There is a lot of stuff that they tried to do that could have been interesting and really fun to play through, but they just didn't have the time. And it really shows with this game. There's a lot of stuff that's really interesting and really fun to still do. The music's enjoyable. You get a lot of like random secrets from like the old games, like you get to see Chesty again from Fable 2. Stuff like that. It's really fun and memorable, but it's just not enough there to pretty much pull you in for more than one playthrough of the game just to wrap up the story. Personally, I still play through it all the time whenever I go through Fable 1 and 2, but that's just because I enjoy playing through all 3. If I'm going to get the experience, I want to get it all. Even though every time I get to Fable 3, it feels worse and worse every time I go through it, which is really sad because I really enjoyed it when I was younger, but I can finally see every single flaw with the game. But if you guys enjoy the content, make sure you leave a like and a sub. And if you have anything to suggest to make videos on for like later date videos, make sure to leave them down in the comments down below. But I'll see you guys next time. See ya.